I still remember the day I received the letter from the HOA. It was an average morning. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee and was sitting on my porch enjoying the crisp air. My driveway stretched out in front of me, smooth and freshly paved, leading from my house to the main road, about 300 feet long. It was something I had worked hard to afford, a home with enough space, peace, and a driveway that allowed my family and guests to park without any trouble. But that peace was shattered when I opened the envelope. The HOA had a problem with my driveway. The letter stated that my driveway was excessively long and did not conform to the community aesthetic. At first I thought it was a joke. Aesthetic? Was a driveway. I had seen plenty of homes with long driveways in other neighborhoods, and no one had ever had an issue with it. But the HOA was different. They claimed that because my driveway extended beyond the approved length listed in the rulebook, I had 60 days to either shorten it or face daily fines. I laughed at the absurdity of it. How does one even shorten a driveway? Dig it up? Block it halfway? It made no sense. I decided to ignore the letter, assuming they would realize how ridiculous their demand was. I was wrong. Within a week, another letter arrived, this time with a fine of $100 per day until I complied. My frustration turned into anger. I had followed every building code, paid for my permits, and done everything legally. I wasn't going to let a group of power-hungry HOA board members tell me what to do with my own property. That's when an idea struck me. If they thought my driveway was too long, I was about to make it the most talked-about driveway in the entire neighborhood. I spent the next few days brainstorming my response. I wasn't just going to fight the HOA's ridiculous complaint, I was going to turn it into something spectacular. That's when the idea hit me. I would turn my driveway into a racetrack. It started as a joke in my head, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The HOA wanted to make an issue out of my driveway? Fine. I'd give them an issue they'd never forget. First, I had to figure out the logistics. I already had a smooth, long driveway, but I needed to make some modifications to make it look more like a track. I began researching racetrack layouts, looking for inspiration from Formula 1, NASCAR, and even go-kart circuits. Since I didn't have the space for a full-fledged racetrack, I settled on something fun but practical. A miniature speedway-style design with painted lines, rumble strips, and even a mock starting grid. Next, I called up a local contractor I knew, Mike, who had worked on my driveway before. When I explained my plan, he laughed for a solid minute before realizing I was serious. "Wait, you're actually gonna do this?" he asked. "Damn right I am," I said. "And I need your help." Mike was more than happy to assist. Within a week we had a basic layout mapped out. I decided to paint actual racing stripes along the edges, creating lanes to make it look official. We even added a finish line near my garage just for fun. To top it all off, I ordered a few mini traffic cones and racing flags from an online store to complete the look. But I wasn't stopping there. I wanted this to be interactive. If I was going to have a racetrack, I needed drivers. That's when I got my neighbors involved. One afternoon, I invited a few friends and local dads over for a barbecue. After a few beers, I pitched my idea. "So, you know how the HOA is giving me crap about my driveway?" I began. They all groaned. Everyone had their own horror stories about the HOA. "Well, I've decided to turn it into a racetrack." Silence. Then laughter. "Wait, you're serious?" one of them asked. Completely. Their excitement was instant. My friend Mark, who owned a couple of go-karts, immediately offered to bring them over. Another neighbor, Jake, who had a few old motorcycles, said he'd test out the track once it was ready. Even the neighborhood kids wanted to join in with their bicycles and scooters. It was becoming a community project. And the best part? There was nothing in the HOA rulebook about not having a racetrack on private property. That's when I realized this was about to be the most epic way to clap back at the HOA. The day we finished the racetrack, I stood back and admired our work. My once too-long driveway was now a fully marked racing circuit. The freshly painted lanes, the rumble strips made of carefully placed bricks, and even a mock pit stop near my garage gave it an incredibly authentic look. But I wasn't stopping there. Race day was coming. I sent out invites to my neighbors, especially the ones who'd been victims of the HOA's ridiculous rules. The plan? A full-blown neighborhood Grand Prix. The reactions begin. Word spread faster than I expected. Kids from the area started riding past my house just to get a peek at the new setup. A few of them asked if they could ride their bikes on the track. Of course I said yes. Before I knew it, my driveway had turned into the unofficial neighborhood hangout spot. And then came the HOA patrol. One afternoon, while I was adjusting some of the finishing touches, I saw Karen, our infamous HOA enforcer, stomping down the sidewalk toward me. She had that signature clipboard in her hands, the same clipboard she used to issue fines and violation notices like they were candy. "Excuse me," she barked, stopping right at the edge of my driveway. "What, exactly, is this?" I turned and grinned. "All this? It's my new racetrack." Her eyes twitched. "Your what?" I gestured toward the lanes, the rumble strips, and the boldly painted start/finish line. Since my driveway is too long for HOA standards, I decided to make good use of it. Now it's a fully functioning racetrack. Karen's face turned beet red. "You can't just, she stammered. "Oh, but I can." I pointed to the HOA rulebook she had tucked under her arm. "Show me where it says a homeowner can't have a private racetrack on their own property." She flipped through the pages aggressively. I watched her eyes dart back and forth as she realized the truth. There was nothing in the HOA bylaws that prohibited what I was doing. "You're violating something," she huffed. "You can't just turn your home into a circus." I smiled. "It's not a circus. It's a Grand Prix. Race day chaos." The day of the first neighborhood Grand Prix was pure chaos, in the best way possible. By the afternoon, nearly half the neighborhood showed up. Kids lined up with their bikes and scooters, adults brought out go-karts, remote control cars, and even an electric skateboard. My friend Jake, who had a small dirt bike, revved his engine ready to tear up the track. I even went all out and set up lawn chairs along the edge of the driveway for spectators. Someone brought a megaphone, and suddenly, we had a full-fledged race announcer giving play-by-play commentary. And they're off. Timmy is in the lead, but oh, here comes Lisa with the scooter overtake. The laughter, the energy, the pure joy of people having fun, it was something the HOA could never control. And that's when Karen came back. This time she wasn't alone. She brought backup. The moment Karen stormed onto my property with 2 other HOA board members, I knew things were about to get interesting. She stood at the edge of my racetrack, her arms crossed so tightly I thought she might snap in half. Behind her, the other board members, Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Avery, looked equally displeased. They were the HOA's most loyal enforcers, always ready to shut down anything remotely fun. I casually leaned against my lawn chair, watching the kids complete another lap. The crowd was cheering, the air was filled with excitement, and my driveway had never been more alive. But the second Karen blew her whistle, the entire event came to a halt. Every head turned. She raised her clipboard like it was a royal decree. "This event is an unauthorized public gathering on HOA property, and it is in direct violation of community regulations." I smirked. "This isn't an event. It's just me and my neighbors enjoying a little friendly competition on my private property." Mrs. Avery stepped forward, her sharp eyes scanning the track. "You painted lanes on your driveway. That is a permanent alteration to your home's exterior, which requires HOA approval." I shrugged. "Oh, don't worry. It's not permanent. It's chalk paint, it'll wash away in a few weeks." Mr. Thompson's jaw clenched. They had nothing. No real violations, no solid argument, just their frustration at being outplayed. Karen, however, wasn't ready to give up. She pulled out a bright yellow violation notice and waved it in my face. "You're getting a fine for this nonsense." I took the paper from her hand and glanced at it. "Fined for excessive recreational activity?" I burst out laughing. "That's not even a real rule." Karen's face twisted with rage. "Well, it is now. The HOA is calling an emergency meeting to put an end to this madness." I grinned. Good luck with that. Because what she didn't know was that I had already started my own plan to overthrow the HOA's power. Karen's threat of an emergency HOA meeting didn't intimidate me. In fact, it played right into my hands. I had spent weeks gathering signatures from my neighbors, proving that the majority of the community was fed up with the HOA's nonsense. The racetrack had become more than just an act of defiance. It had turned into a symbol of how ridiculous the HOA's control had become. So, when Karen scheduled the emergency meeting for that Friday evening, I was ready. The community center was packed. I had never seen so many homeowners in one place before. Dozens of people showed up, some holding copies of the outrageous fines they had received over the years, others just tired of the constant harassment. Karen sat at the front, flanked by Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Avery. Her signature scowl was firmly in place as she slammed a gavel on the table. "This meeting has been called to address the illegal modifications to a homeowner's property, which violate the HOA's regulations." Her voice was sharp, filled with authority. "Mr. Walker, do you have anything to say for yourself before we proceed with disciplinary action?" I stood up, completely unfazed. Actually, Karen, I do. I pulled out my own set of papers and laid them on the table. These are the signatures of 75% of our community members. They agree that the HOA has overstepped its boundaries for too long. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face paled. That's impossible. I smiled. Oh, it's very possible. You see, Karen, we're not just here to discuss my racetrack. We're here to discuss a vote of no confidence in the HOA board. Gasps filled the room. Even Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Karen shook her head furiously. You can't just. Actually, we can. I cut her off. According to HOA bylaws, if enough members of the community petition for it, we can force a re-election of board members. And guess what? We have more than enough support. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She had spent years controlling the community with her ridiculous rules, but now the power was slipping away. I turned to the audience. So let's put it to a vote. Who here wants to see a new HOA board? Hands shot up all across the room. Karen's fate was sealed. Karen's face turned beet red as she saw hand after hand shoot up in the air. Her iron grip over the neighborhood was crumbling right before her eyes. This is a violation of the HOA charter, she stammered, gripping the gavel like it was the last thing anchoring her to power. You can't just overthrow the board like this. I leaned forward, tapping the HOA bylaws I had printed out. Actually, Karen, we can. Section 12.4 states that if a majority of homeowners agree, we can force an immediate re-election of all HOA board members. The room buzzed with energy. Neighbors whispered excitedly to one another, some even cheering. For years they had suffered under Karen's petty, authoritarian rule. Now they had the power to change it. Mrs. Avery, one of the other board members, hesitated before standing up. Karen, they have the numbers. We need to respect the vote. Karen's eyes widened in betrayal. You're turning on me? Mrs. Avery sighed. No, Karen. You turned on all of us. Mr. Thompson removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. Let's just hold the vote. We can't fight the entire neighborhood. Karen clenched her jaw, but she knew it was over. The HOA re-election happened right there in the community center. One by one, names were put forward. People nominated me to join the board, and by an overwhelming majority, I was voted in as the new HOA president. Karen? She didn't even make the top 5. She stormed out of the room, muttering about lawyers and ungrateful neighbors, but no one paid her any attention. Once the dust settled, I turned to my newly elected board members and smiled. All right, first order of business. Let's eliminate some of these ridiculous rules. The crowd erupted in cheers. 1 month later, under the new HOA leadership, everything changed. Unnecessary fines were dropped, homeowners got more freedom over their properties, and the entire community felt lighter without Karen breathing down their necks. And my racetrack? Still there. But now, instead of being a symbol of defiance, it became a place for neighborhood gatherings, races, and fun. Sometimes as I sat on my porch watching the kids race around the track, I couldn't help but laugh. Karen tried to force me out of the neighborhood. Instead, I became the one running it. Smiling face with sunglasses.